My name is Elias Carter, and on the night everything went wrong inside the old Brookfall Galleria, I had been a security guard there for exactly 12 hours. I wasn't supposed to be. The job was meant to start next week, with proper training, paperwork, and the long list of closing procedures I assumed every abandoned property would have. Instead, I got a text around noon saying a guard had quit mid-shift, that the company needed someone calm, reliable, and willing to overlook minor irregularities. I didn't know what minor meant. I didn't know it was corporate shorthand for don't freak out and we'll pretend you're not in danger. I didn't know anything at all except that I needed the paycheck. I arrived at dusk, the sky bruising into that stale orange glow that always seems to sit above a dead commercial district. Brookfall Galleria had been shuttered for 9 years, the kind of abandoned mall local kids dared each other to break into. Half the windows were boarded up. The ones that weren't showed nothing but an ocean of black behind them, as though the whole interior had swallowed any trace of light. When I stepped through the staff entrance, the first thing that hit me was the cold. Not a draft, not normal evening chill, but a cold that felt like walking into a room after someone turned off the heat 6 hours ago. The second thing I noticed was that the other guard, the one whose shift I was taking over, wasn't there. The supervisor on the phone told me not to worry. He's probably in one of the back offices. Happens all the time. Just start your rounds. That wasn't reassuring. I checked the duty logbook on the desk and saw the last entry written at 4:32 p.m. A shaky line where a pen had dragged off the page suggested whoever wrote it either dropped the pen or got up in a hurry. I tried calling his radio. Nothing. Dead static. The mall layout was simple enough. 2 levels for empty anchor stores, a central atrium with a big fountain that had been dry for a decade, and a maintenance passage that circled the structure behind all the storefronts. My shift was supposed to be 12 hours, from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and the only job description I'd been given was patrol hourly, check cameras, report trespassers. It should have been boring. In hindsight, I would have preferred boring. I started with the ground level, sweeping my flashlight across the hollow storefronts. Clothing racks still stood in some of them, stripped bare, like skeletons of what used to be commerce. A few faded sale posters still clung to the walls with peeling tape. My footsteps echoed too much, like the floor didn't absorb sound properly. I told myself it was because the place was empty and tiled. I told myself a lot of things that night. It wasn't until I reached the escalators that I felt the first wrongness settle into my spine. The air shifted in a way I can only describe as heavy, like stepping into a room where someone had been arguing just moments before. The hairs on my forearms rose instantly. The escalators, of course, were dead. They hadn't run in years. But halfway up the rail, my flashlight caught something shiny. A smear of red, fresh red, wet red. My throat tightened. Maybe the missing guard hurt himself? Maybe he cut his hand on the railing or slipped. I followed the smear up the steps, scanning every direction. That's when the radios crackled. Not mine. Not from any direction I could pinpoint. Just a split second of static, sharp and electric, as though a walkie-talkie somewhere deep in the mall had been keyed. "Hello," I called out, hating the tremor in my voice. The static cut again, this time longer. I strained to catch words, but there weren't any, or if there were, they dissolved under the interference. My flashlight flickered. A cold draft rolled down the escalator like someone exhaling. And then the lights above the atrium flickered, dim to bright to dim again, like a heartbeat struggling. That was when I learned Rule 1, though I didn't know it was a rule yet. A voice behind me spoke softly, too close, forcing every muscle in my neck to lock. "Don't acknowledge the static." I spun around so fast I nearly fell. A man stood 3 steps below me, wearing the same uniform as mine but older, faded, the fabric thinner and frayed around the sleeves. His name tag was scratched beyond recognition. His expression didn't change when my light hit him square in the face. He looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept through a night shift in years. "You must be the new replacement," he said, voice low and flat. "You shouldn't have answered the noise." I tried to ask who he was, but he held up a hand and shook his head tightly. "Not here. Not by the escalators." His eyes twitched up the steps as though expecting something to be standing behind me. "Walk. Don't run. Don't look back unless you hear footsteps. If you hear footsteps, actually, never mind. Let's hope you don't." I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to get out of that mall, but something in his face rooted me in place. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was resignation, the look of a person who had accepted a reality they couldn't escape. We walked side by side into the maintenance hall behind the food court. He didn't speak at first. I didn't push. My flashlight beam trembled over pipes and shuttered service doors. Whatever I thought I'd signed up for, this wasn't it. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "You weren't briefed." Typical. They never brief replacements. His voice sounded angrier now, but not at me. "There are rules. 4 of them. You learn them or you don't survive the shift." I felt a cold knot form under my ribs. "What rules?" I whispered. He looked at me with a grim patience. "The kind you use when explaining something horrible to someone who doesn't yet understand they're in danger." "You already broke the first one," he said. "And if something heard you..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The maintenance corridor swallowed us in a dim, humming chill that made the overhead pipes creak like something alive was shifting above us. The older guard stayed half a step ahead of me, walking with a pace that looked slow but somehow stretched the hallway out endlessly, as though he knew exactly how fast he needed to move to keep something behind us uninterested. I kept glancing over my shoulder even though he'd told me not to. Nothing was there. Just the long concrete corridor running straight, door after door after door, as if the mall had grown too many back rooms and didn't remember what any of them were for. He didn't tell me his name. He didn't tell me why he'd appeared out of nowhere at the escalators. He didn't tell me why his uniform looked decades older than mine. He just kept walking until we reached a small service office on the far side of the food court. The moment he stepped inside, he reached for the door and pulled it shut behind us. I felt the air change instantly, warmer but still stale. The room was small. A desk, an unplugged computer monitor, a wall of old black and white camera feeds flickering faintly. My flashlight beam reflected off dust floating in the air like drifting ash. The man leaned against the desk with a sigh that felt too heavy for a place this empty. "You didn't hear anything following us, did you?" he asked without looking up. I swallowed. "No." "Good. They don't always show interest when the first rule gets broken. Sometimes they're occupied elsewhere." "Who's they?" I whispered. He pressed his lips together, choosing his words like someone defusing a bomb. "Not trespassers, not squatters, not animals, just things that learn to fill the spaces people left behind." He glanced at me. "The mall is empty, but it isn't unoccupied." I felt the urge to laugh because the alternative was panic. He didn't crack a smile. "Okay," I said slowly. "Then tell me the rules." He raised a single finger. "Rule 1, he murmured. "If you hear static, ignore it. It's not radio interference. It's not the PA system. It's something using frequencies we respond to. It tests for attention. If you acknowledge the sound, you're acknowledging them." And I broke that one. "You did. But yelling hello isn't as bad as answering a direct question. You should be fine." Probably. That word started a tight pulse behind my jaw. He held up a second finger. "Rule 2. Don't look at any reflections after midnight." I blinked at him, confused. Reflections? Like windows. Anything reflective, he said. Glass, water, polished metal. Your phone screen if it's dark enough. Doesn't matter. After midnight, the reflections sometimes stop lining up correctly. You'll move, but the reflection won't. Or it'll move first. His voice tightened. And if it notices you noticing the difference, it doesn't like that. I stared at him, waiting for a punchline, but his face remained drawn, hollow, and absolutely serious. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, the motion stiff, tired. It's not complicated, he said quietly. Just don't look at anything shiny after midnight. Stay away from store windows especially. You think you're alone. You're not. Whatever's left in here, it likes to mimic familiar shapes. So, my own reflection might try to. He cut me off sharply. Don't think about what it might do. Thinking about it draws attention too. My throat felt dry. My tongue felt rough. The air in the office pressed down on the back of my neck like invisible fingers. Are there 4 rules total? I asked. He nodded. You'll learn the other 2 as we go. But you need to understand something before we leave this room. His eyes locked onto mine, the seriousness in them so sharp it almost hurt to hold his gaze. No matter what happens tonight, you stay close. You don't wander off. You don't try to be a hero. Whatever you hear, whatever you think you see, whatever you want to investigate, ignore all of it. Curiosity is how the last guy disappeared. The last guy, the guard I was replacing. The guard whose last log entry ended abruptly at 4:32 p.m. Before I could ask what happened to him, the lights in the room flickered twice, then steadied. The older guard's jaw clenched. It's early, he whispered. It usually doesn't start shifting until later. What's shifting? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped toward the wall of flickering monitors and pointed. I followed his finger to a grainy feed showing the central atrium. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The dry fountain that stood there the last time I passed through was different. Something tall was standing inside it. I leaned closer. What is that? Don't describe it, he snapped. Don't say what it looks like. Don't assign shape or intent. The more definition you give it, the more real it becomes. The figure didn't move. It just stood there in the center of the fountain basin, long and dark, its edges blurred like bad reception. Even pixelated, something about the height seemed wrong. Too tall for a person, too thin for a mannequin. How long has it been there? I whispered. He exhaled shakily. It wasn't there earlier. A faint clicking echoed through the pipes above us, as if something crawled through the metal, searching. We need to move, he said suddenly. If that thing is manifesting early, it means the mall shifted faster tonight. That throws the entire schedule off. The schedule? I repeated, hating the way the question sounded like a child asking a parent to turn on a nightlight. There's a pattern, he said. A cycle. If it accelerates... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. He opened the door a crack. The hallway outside was darker than before, as though the lights had dimmed on their own. He motioned for me to follow. As soon as we stepped out, I heard it. Far down the corridor, faint but distinct, footsteps. Slow, dragging, one after the other. The older guard went rigid. Don't look back, he said in a razor-thin whisper. I froze. Why? What is that? He didn't blink, didn't breathe. That, he murmured, is what happens when Rule 3 is about to matter. The footsteps behind us were so soft they could have been imagined, but the older guard's reaction told me they were real and bad. He didn't touch me, but he moved with the absolute expectation that I would follow, walking fast but not fast enough to seem like we were fleeing. I forced my breathing to stay steady even though my lungs felt tight from holding back the animal instinct to run. "Don't look back," he repeated under his breath. "Not for any reason. Not right now." The corridor stretched ahead, illuminated by a series of overhead lights that felt weaker with each section we passed. My shadow kept sliding forward and stretching, as if trying to detach and sprint away on its own. I kept my eyes locked on the older guard's shoulders, the slight tension in the way he held himself, the twitch of his head whenever the footsteps behind us gained a fraction of speed. "Is that part of Rule 3? I whispered. "Yes," he said. "When something behind you walks, do not turn around. If you turn, you validate it. If you validate it, it takes shape it didn't have before. And once it has shape," a louder step echoed down the hall, like something heavy landing on one foot. He didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need him to. The older guard slowed near an emergency exit that I knew was permanently bolted shut. He stopped 3 feet from it and motioned for me to stand beside him. The footsteps were closer now. My palms were sweating so hard I almost dropped my flashlight. He leaned his face near mine, speaking so quietly I barely heard him. "When it reaches the threshold behind us, it will stop. It always does. Can't cross the gap unless you turn. Just keep your eyes forward until it loses interest." "How long does that take?" "Varies. What if it doesn't lose interest?" He didn't blink. "It will, unless you look back." The footsteps slowed, then stopped, right behind us. The silence after was unbearable. Thick, pressing. It felt like someone standing close enough that I could feel their breath on my neck. Except there was no breath, no warmth, just a void of cold like someone had opened a freezer door inches from my skin. My eyes watered from how wide I kept them. The older guard didn't move at all. He looked like he'd frozen in place years ago and only now had a reason to stay that way. Something tapped the floor. A single, gentle tap. A finger? A toe? A cane? Then the sound shifted, like nails dragging lightly across tile. Not moving closer, not moving away, just drawing invisible circles on the ground. My stomach threatened to revolt. "Is it always like this?" I mouthed. He barely nodded. "Just wait." The scratching stopped. Something exhaled, except it wasn't air. It was an absence of sound, a reverse breath that pulled faintly on the air in front of us, like a vacuum trying to suck in the space around our bodies. I felt the pressure tug at my shirt. Then, suddenly, the footsteps receded. Slowly, methodically, like whatever owned them was backing into the dark with deliberate disappointment. When they faded entirely, the older guard let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in his lungs for years. "That," he said quietly, "is Rule 3. If something walks behind you, don't look back. It's not following you. It's testing you." "Testing me for what?" I whispered. "For whether you're giving it a shape. They like shape. They crave it." My legs felt numb. Even when I finally dared to breathe normally, the cold in my spine stayed like a steel rod. The older guard motioned again for me to follow, and we moved deeper into the service corridor until we reached a door labeled electrical. He opened it with a key that looked older than both of us and ushered me inside. The hum in the room was louder. Transformers, breaker boxes, century-old wiring buzzing behind metal panels. "They fight the lights," he said, scanning the gauges. "We keep them stable, we keep control. That's the deal." "What happens if the lights go out?" I asked. He gave a humorless half-smile. "They don't go out," he said. "Not all the way. That's Rule 4. He turned one of the dials slowly, steadying a flickering indicator light. "Rule 4, he said, "is never let the mall go completely dark. Darkness here isn't just absence of light. It's The entire electrical panel jumped violently with a metallic crack that reverberated through the room. My flashlight flickered, and the overhead bulb sputtered like it was being squeezed. The older guard swore under his breath and threw his shoulder against a rusted lever, forcing it down hard. The hum stabilized, but only barely. "Someone's interfering," he muttered. "They must have found a way into the northern conduit again." "Someone," I repeated. "Not human." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. My stomach was already knotting itself. He checked a second panel, then turned to me with urgency, sharpening his voice. "We need to get to the atrium. If that distortion we saw on the monitor is growing early, it means the cycle is collapsing. If we don't reset the light's pattern in time, the whole structure will shift." The floor beneath my boots shuddered, just slightly, like the building had exhaled in irritation. "What do you mean, shift?" He grabbed a flashlight from the wall and shoved it into my hands. "Doors won't lead where they're supposed to," he said. "Corridors stretch, stores shrink, exits vanish. If the mall decides it doesn't want you to leave, you don't leave." A hollow clanging echoed from the pipes overhead, like something large was crawling through them on all fours. The older guard's eyes snapped upward. "They're moving," he whispered, "faster than they should." "Who's moving?" "The ones that come when the reflections change." My blood ran cold. "But it's not midnight yet," I said. He swallowed hard. "It is now." I checked my phone. 12:01 a.m. And every reflective surface in the mall was suddenly unsafe. Before I could process that, a distant, sharp crack rang out, glass breaking. The older guard went white. "Something noticed itself in a window," he whispered. He yanked open the electrical room door. "We run. Now." We bolted into the corridor, our footsteps pounding against the concrete as the overhead lights flickered like something was pinching the wires between its teeth. The air felt heavier now, thicker, like the mall's lungs were failing. Somewhere far off, metal clattered against tile. Too loud, too sudden, too intentional. The older guard didn't slow, didn't glance back, didn't even check if I was keeping up. He moved with the urgency of someone who'd already seen what happened when you weren't fast enough. "Don't look toward any glass," he warned between breaths. "Don't let anything reflective catch your eye." "How do I avoid that in a mall?" I gasped. "You don't," he said. "You just survive it." We rounded a corner into a broader maintenance hall, this one with several side passages angling off like ribs. A faint glow pulsed from somewhere ahead, dim, silvery, wrong. It reminded me of moonlight reflected on water. The older guard stopped abruptly, and I nearly rammed into him. "Is that?" I whispered. He shook his head fast. "Don't look at it directly. Keep to the wall. Don't let it catch your reflection." I stared at the floor, focusing on the scuffed concrete, the scattered dust, the faint shoe prints leading forward, mine, his, and another set I didn't remember seeing before. Smaller, barefoot, toes splayed unnaturally wide. My throat tightened. We passed the side passage where the pale glow throbbed like a heartbeat. Something shifted inside that light, but I forced myself not to look. I kept to the wall, kept my eyes down, kept breathing through the rising wave of dread. Once we cleared it, I exhaled shakily. The older guard didn't look relieved. He just kept moving. "What was that?" I whispered. "A reflection without a source," he said. "A mimic looking for a shape. That's what happens after midnight. If you look at it long enough, it becomes you." We reached the door leading out to the food court. The older guard paused before opening it, one hand hovering over the push bar. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Once we're through this door, the atrium's open space means reflections everywhere. Floor tiles, railings, store windows. You keep your eyes on me, you don't wander, and you don't try to understand anything you see. I nodded, though my stomach churned with a sick mix of adrenaline and the dawning horror of what midnight truly meant in this place. He pushed the door open. The food court was wrong. Not dramatically at first glance, not in a way the brain could articulate, but in a way the gut instantly revolted against. The tables were arranged differently. The signage over the empty counters seemed slightly shifted, as if someone had lifted every sign a half-inch and forgotten to lower it the exact same way. The floor tiles had a pattern I didn't remember, but the worst part was the far wall. It was glass floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking the atrium. I froze. "I can't walk past that," I whispered, pulse hammering. "I'll see." "You won't look," he said. "You'll watch the ground. Or me. Nothing else." He stepped forward first. I forced each foot to move, scanning only his boots, his shadow, the familiar scuffs and worn edges of his uniform. My peripheral vision trembled with movement. Shapes bending in glass, colors smearing, something tall brushing past the windows on the outside of the atrium, even though there was no outside anymore, just more mall. "Eyes down," he warned. "Don't let your brain try to fill the gaps." We made it past the glass wall and into the open mouth of the atrium. The figure from the fountain was gone. Or no, it wasn't gone. It was just taller now, thinner, stretched. It stood near the far escalator, blurred at the edges like the distortion on an old TV screen. My eyes pulled toward it instinctively, and I had to wrench my gaze back to the floor to stop myself from looking fully. "Don't focus on it," he said sharply. "It reacts to attention. Just keep moving." The railing beside us reflected light in long horizontal streaks. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, but every time we passed a railing post I caught faint glimpses of motion that didn't match ours. Shapes that bent in angles too sharp for human limbs. The older guard suddenly grabbed my sleeve and pulled me close. "Don't look left," he breathed. "Your reflection didn't move the way we did." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What do? We get to the reset panel. It's behind the fountain. Once we activate the cycle manually, the distortions stabilize." "And what about—" I didn't finish the question, but he knew what I meant. "The tall one?" I nodded. "It won't interfere unless you acknowledge it." "Meaning look at it? Or think about it too clearly?" We moved in a sideways arc around the fountain area, weaving between broken tiles and abandoned kiosks. My vision blurred from trying so hard not to see anything in the reflective surfaces. Every glass storefront felt like a trap waiting to catch my face, my movement, my shape. We reached the fountain edge. The older guard crouched, popping open a rusted access panel. Inside was a series of rotary controls and old circuit toggles caked with dust. He handed me a small flashlight. "Hold it steady. Don't look up. Don't react to anything." What would I be reacting to? I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer. Behind us, something dripped onto the floor. Not water, something thicker, something that hit tile with a sick, sticky sound. Then another drip. Closer. The older guard worked faster, twisting a dial until it clicked. "Keep your head down." "What's dripping?" I whispered. "Not relevant. Ignore it." The third drop hit my shoe. Ice crawled up my spine. I forced myself not to look, not to move, not to breathe too sharply. "It knows we're here," I whispered. "It does," he agreed. "But it doesn't know our shapes yet. Don't give it the satisfaction." He twisted the final toggle. The lights in the atrium stuttered, then flared, then settled into a steady hum. "Is that it?" I asked. He exhaled. "That's the reset." A long, shuddering groan echoed through the mall, like the entire structure exhaling reluctantly. The dripping stopped. Okay, I whispered. Now what? He closed the panel and stood slowly. Now, he said, we leave the atrium before it decides to rearrange itself again. But as we turned to go, we heard it. A soft knock, then another, coming from the glass storefronts behind us. The older guard tensed. That's not supposed to happen this early, he whispered. Something knocked again, closer this time, and then, horrifyingly, a voice behind the glass whispered my name. But it wasn't my voice. It was his. The voice behind the glass whispered my name again, perfectly mimicking the older guard's cadence, tone, and breath pattern. The familiarity made the wrongness sharper, like hearing your own voicemail played back in a different rhythm. I froze mid-step. The older guard didn't. Keep walking, he said firmly. That's not me. But it sounds. That's the point. Don't answer it. The knock came again. 3 slow taps against the storefront window to our right. The lights above flickered, then steadied, as if the mall itself were warning us, urging us to hurry. My reflection in the glossy tile floor warped slightly, and I lifted my foot before I could watch it distort further. The voice behind the glass called for me a third time, longer now, like it was learning how to articulate emotion it shouldn't have access to. Elias, it whispered. Not a question, not a call, a beckoning. My breath hitched. Why does it know my name? The older guard clenched his jaw. Because you broke Rule 1. A cold flush spread behind my ribs. But all I did was say hello when I heard. That's enough. You answered the static. You acknowledged it. Once it has your attention, it learns fast. The glass to our right creaked, like something leaned against it with weight far heavier than a human's. The faint shudder passed through the floor tiles beneath us. I forced myself to keep moving. My feet felt like bags of wet sand. The older guard steered us toward a maintenance door on the far side of the atrium. We reached it just as something tapped the glass again, this time a fast, almost irritated tapping like impatience. Don't look at it, he warned again, reaching for the handle. As soon as he touched the door, it rattled violently in its frame. Metal groaned. He jerked his hand back, startled. It locked itself, he muttered. What do you mean it locked itself? I whispered. I mean the mall shifted early. This wasn't supposed to seal until 2. The tapping turned to knocking. Harder, louder, faster. Not frantic. Rhythmic, like something mimicking a pattern it heard once and decided to repeat until perfect. We backed away slowly. Behind the glass, a shadow leaned forward. The reflection of that shadow stretched across the tiles toward us, even though the ambient light didn't match the angle. My stomach twisted. I kept my eyes down. The older guard whispered sharply, "Don't stop walking. Don't look. Don't engage." We skirted the edge of the atrium, moving in a diagonal path that kept the windows to our right and the fountain to our left. The knocking followed us. Tap, 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 tap. Every hair on my arms lifted as a far-off scraping noise started somewhere deep in the building, like metal skidding across floor tiles. The guard swore softly under his breath. "That means the feeders woke up," he muttered. "We have maybe 15 minutes before they start moving down from the vents." "What's a feeder?" I asked. He paused just long enough to shoot me a look I didn't want to interpret. "You don't want to see one." As if summoned by the word, a metallic rattle ran through an overhead duct. The steel vibrated like something large was dragging itself through the ventilation system, scraping metal claws or elbows or something too disproportionate to belong in a human body. We ducked into another maintenance hallway as the atrium behind us pulsed faintly with unnatural movement, shadows shifting with no source. The older guard shut the door quietly behind us. The hallway smelled of old cardboard, industrial cleaner, and dust. The flickering fluorescent lights above us hummed. I exhaled shakily. You said earlier something interfered with the electrical system, I whispered. Was that one of the feeders? He nodded. They like the dark, but not pitch black. They like places where light breaks, where shadows aren't consistent. So they're trying to break the lights? They always do. The metallic scraping echoed again. Closer now, just above our heads. I whispered, "Why are we going toward the north corridor? I thought the conduit was compromised." "It is," he said. "That's why we have to go there. If they pull out the wiring, the whole mall drops into a blackout cycle, and none of us make it out." My heartbeat pounded in my ears. "So if the lights go out completely, we stop being in a mall," he finished. "We become part of what's inside it." I swallowed hard. My flashlight trembled in my hand. We reached a heavy metal service stairwell door. The older guard cracked it open and peeked inside. It was dark, too dark, but a thin emergency bulb glowed feebly at the landing below. "That's enough," he whispered. "It hasn't failed yet." We stepped in carefully, the stairwell's echo amplifying everything. Tiny bits of dust drifted down from the vents above, like something was dislodging it as it crawled. Halfway down the stairs, I heard movement behind us. Slow, deliberate. My skin crawled. "Is that—" I began. "Rule 3, he reminded in a tight whisper. "Do not look back." I stared straight ahead. The footsteps behind us matched ours. Exactly. Just a half-beat late, like an echo with its own personality. I tried not imagining what shape might form if I turned. It was almost unbearable, forcing myself to face forward as something behind us learned our cadence, our pace, our breathing. "We need to reach the northern conduit," he said. "Once we stabilize the lights, they lose interest, at least for a while. And if we don't?" He hesitated. "Then Rule 4 becomes your tombstone." We descended the last flight, stepping into another maintenance hall lined with old electrical panels. One of the panels was open, wires torn out, hanging like veins spilling into the air. The older guard cursed quietly. "They've already been here." The vents above rattled again. Closer. Whatever was crawling was nearly directly over us. He knelt by the open panel, pulling tools from his belt. Old, rusted tools that looked like they'd been replaced everywhere except this forgotten corner of the world. "Keep watch," he said without looking up. "Watch for what?" I whispered. "You'll know," he said grimly. "They're not subtle when they drop down." My chest tightened. Drop down. The vent above us bent inward with a metallic groan. Something was pushing through, and whatever it wasn't small. Dust drifted down. A long shadow slid across the wall, stretching too far. A wet sound followed, like something dragging its weight along metal. "Guard," I whispered, backing up. "Something's—" He didn't look up. "I know. Just keep your eyes off any reflective metal. They mimic through surfaces too." The vent bulged. A thin, pale limb slipped through, jointed wrong, bending in angles that made my stomach flip. Another limb followed. Then a face appeared. Not human, not even pretending to be. Thin, featureless. Skin stretched tight like paper. It angled its head toward me. I froze. "Don't move," the older guard whispered. And then the thing opened its mouth. Not to scream, but to imitate the older guard's voice. Perfectly. "Elias," it said. The thing hanging from the vent repeated my name again, shaping the syllables like it was rolling unfamiliar sounds around in its mouth. Except it didn't have a mouth, not really. Just a slit that opened too wide, stretching ear to ear, the skin peeling like wet paper. Its voice was the older guard's, but warped slightly, as though played on a damaged cassette tape. Familiar enough to trick the brain, wrong enough to trigger every primal instinct screaming at me to run. "Don't respond," the older guard warned through clenched teeth, still working the wires. "It only knows what you give it." The creature dropped lower, its limbs bent and jerking, unnatural increments as it eased itself through the vent, each movement accompanied by a faint, sticky sound, like wet tape being peeled off a surface. The long, pale fingers reached the floor first. They splayed and twisted, knuckles bending backward. It lowered its head next, hanging upside down like a predatory bat. It leaned forward. "Elias," it said again, more confidently this time. I stepped back instinctively. My heel hit a toolbox, clattering metal across the floor. The creature's head snapped toward the sound so fast the motion blurred. That slit of a mouth stretched further. The older guard hissed, "Don't move. Don't speak. Don't acknowledge. I can't just stand. Quiet." His voice was sharp enough to cut air. The creature turned toward him next. Its body jerked in small, deliberate increments, muscles contracting in odd places beneath stretched skin. The vent above groaned as its remaining limbs uncoiled. It dropped fully, landing with a soft, wet thud. It stood too tall, too thin, its limbs too long for anything with human origin. Took a step toward us. The lights flickered. The sound of scraping wires filled the hall. "Nearly there," the older guard muttered, twisting another connector. "Just keep it distracted without engaging." I choked. How the hell do I distract something without engaging? "Just exist," he snapped. "It's already interested in you. Don't feed it more." The creature tilted its head at me again. Its neck stretched unnaturally, vertebrae clicking one by one like someone slowly cracking knuckles. Then its face twitched, and for a split second, the skin shifted. My own cheekbones flashed beneath it. My nose, my jawline, my eyes, my reflection. It was trying to become me. I slapped a hand over my mouth to stifle the panic rising through my throat. The creature took another slow step. The older guard cursed under his breath, fumbling through wires. "It's accelerating. It shouldn't be able to mimic this early unless the shift is almost complete." "What shift?" He didn't answer. He yanked a final wire into place and slammed the panel shut. The emergency lights surged bright, humming with renewed stability. The creature reeled. Its limbs contracted inward as the pulses of artificial light rippled across its skin. It made a noise like a reverse scream, air being sucked in violently rather than pushed out. It staggered backward toward the vent. Then it lunged. Not at me, at the older guard. He threw himself sideways as one of its limbs whipped past, slicing through the air where his throat had been. The creature screeched, an awful, warping sound that made the metal walls vibrate. "Run!" he yelled. I didn't hesitate. My feet punched against the tile as I sprinted down the corridor. The older guard ran beside me, limping slightly from the dive he'd taken. Behind us, the creature scraped across the floor in a frantic series of jerking motions. Metal clanged as it half-sprinted, half-scrambled after us. It hit the wall once, rebounded, and let out another inverted wail that echoed down the hall like air collapsing inward. "Don't look back," he barked. I couldn't. My peripheral vision burned with the knowledge that something was chasing us. Something tall enough that its fingertips dragged the ceiling. Something fast enough that the floor seemed to vibrate beneath each stride. We burst through the end of the corridor into a wide loading bay. The older guard slammed the heavy door behind us and threw the latch. The creature hit the other side instantly. The door bowed inward, denting with the impact. The older guard grabbed my arm and yanked me deeper into the loading bay. "Move!" We ran past abandoned forklifts and stacked pallets draped in rotting tarps. The concrete floor was colder here, the air biting, as if we'd stepped into the lungs of the building. Ahead, A large rolling gate loomed, half opened, half jammed, light from the parking lot spilling faintly through the gap. "We're leaving," I panted, chest burning. "No," he said, "we can't. Not until the cycle finishes." "What cycle?" But before he could answer, the loading bay lights flickered violently. Every reflective surface, metal pallet racks, forklift mirrors, the sheen on the concrete, warped at once. Shadows elongated. Shapes deepened. My own reflection, faint in the metal side of a forklift, twisted. My face held still while I moved. Then its eyes slid sideways toward me of their own accord. I jerked away with a hiss. "It's happening everywhere," the older guard said. "The reflection bleed has spread to the back half of the property." The pounding on the door behind us stopped. Silence replaced it. Stillness. A hollow quiet that didn't feel like relief. The older guard froze. His breath hitched. "That's not good," he whispered. "What does silence mean?" "It means it stopped trying to enter, because it found another way in." A soft scraping echoed in the rafters above us. Slow, too slow, like something savoring each movement. I looked up despite myself. Between the beams, a thin silhouette crawled upside down. The same elongated limbs, the same paper skin face. But it wasn't alone. Two more silhouettes followed. All three of them paused in unison, heads turning toward us with terrible synchronization. The older guard grabbed my shoulder. "We run. We don't stop. We don't look anywhere shiny. And for the love of God, don't let them say your name." One of the creatures whispered above us. "Elias." Three voices this time, layered, learning, hungry. The three creatures above us whispered my name again, overlapping each other until the sound felt like it was dripping directly into my ears. Their voices started at the same pitch, then split, too high, too low, harmonizing in ways that made my skull vibrate. Every muscle in my body tensed. I didn't want to run. I wanted to freeze. I wanted to shut my eyes and pretend none of this existed. The older guard shoved me hard. "Go!" I staggered forward, catching myself just as one of the creatures dropped from the rafters. It hit the concrete with a soft, nauseating thud, limbs bending like ropes soaked in glue. Its head snapped toward me, jaw splitting open, stretching skin until it tore. Behind me, the other two scuttled along the beams, their limbs scraping metal with a sound like teeth grinding. We sprinted toward the far end of the loading bay, weaving through stacks of collapsed cardboard and old equipment. My flashlight beam swung wildly, glancing off reflections I tried desperately not to look at. Every shiny surface threatened to show more than light. Twisted faces, wrong angles, shadows that moved when we didn't. Behind us, the creatures started clicking their limbs against the concrete, the sound gaining speed. "They're coming faster," I gasped. "They learn movement," the older guard said. "Stop making predictable patterns." "What does that mean?" "Stop running like a person." I didn't know what that meant. He suddenly veered diagonally across the loading bay, and I followed, lungs burning, knees shaking. The creatures behind us screeched in frustration as their echo-mimic rhythm faltered. They adjusted, adapted, got faster. "Not enough," he muttered. "We need misdirection." He grabbed a fallen metal pipe from the floor and hurled it in the opposite direction. Clanged loudly, bouncing twice before rolling. The creatures immediately split, one following the noise, two coming for us. "That's not enough," he breathed. "We need shadows." "Shadows?" I didn't have time to ask. He yanked open a maintenance door next to an old hydraulic lift, shoving me inside before slamming it behind us. The room was pitch black except for our flashlights. He snapped his off immediately. "Turn it off," he whispered. "But now." I clicked my flashlight off, plunging us into total darkness. I could hear my pulse in my throat. The door rattled as something brushed against it. The older guard grabbed my sleeve. "Stay perfectly still. They can't navigate pure dark. Confuses them. They hate it." "But you said that the mall can't go dark," he said quietly. "This room isn't the mall. Sealed. A dead pocket. No reflections." Something scraped against the outside of the door, slow, testing, patient. "They know we're here," I whispered. "They know the room is here," he corrected. "Not us. Not if we don't move." A faint sniffing sound followed. Wet, deep, heavy. Something dragging its breath down the seam of the door. My hands shook uncontrollably, and I pressed them against my chest to make the tremor smaller. The older guard's fingers tightened on my sleeve in warning. Seconds passed. Then minutes. The scraping stopped. Silence pooled around us, thick and heavy. I whispered, "Are they gone?" The older guard didn't answer. He strained his ear toward the door, listening. Only the faint hum of wiring, old and weak, filled the room. He slowly exhaled. "Not gone, but they moved away." I swallowed, trying to keep my lungs quiet. "Where do they go?" "To reflections. They travel best through mirrors, glass, anything that can hold shape. They're probably checking every storefront now, trying to see if we show up in any of the wrong reflections." My stomach twisted. "And what if we do?" "Then they find us," he said simply. A small red emergency bulb flickered to life in the corner of the room. It hummed, warming up to a faint glow, barely enough to see the outline of the older guard's face. His expression was tight, determined, scared in a way he was trying not to show. "We don't have much time," he said. "Once the backup power kicks in, this room won't be safe. We have to move." "Move where?" "To the center," he said. "The heart of the mall. That's where the original flow control is. It can override the cycle if we get there before the distortions peak." "And if we don't?" He looked at me with an expression so heavy it landed like a punch. "Then the mall seals, and anyone inside becomes permanent." Permanent. The word echoed in my skull like a bell tolling. "Come on," he said, pulling a small pry bar from his belt. "We take the back catwalk. It avoids the main reflective surfaces." He pried open a low panel at the back of the room, revealing a narrow tunnel barely tall enough to crawl through. Dust billowed out. "You first," he whispered. My whole body protested, but I crawled in. The floor was cold metal, the walls close enough to scrape my shoulders. The older guard followed, pulling the panel shut behind us. The tunnel twisted left, then right, then sloped downward, air growing colder with every foot. I could feel the vibrations of the mall through the metal, the shudder of lights struggling, the distant echo of claws tapping glass, the hum of structural strain like a living creature exhaling. We crawled in silence for minutes that felt like hours until the tunnel opened into a narrow steel walkway lit by a single flickering overhead bulb. Below us was a dark, cavernous void where pipes, ducts, and support beams ran like exposed ribs beneath the mall. Something moved in the darkness below, large, slow, dragging across beams like it didn't care about stealth. The older guard pointed ahead. "That way, quiet." We stepped carefully, the metal grating rattling softly beneath our boots. Halfway across the walkway, a faint voice drifted up from the darkness. "Elias!" But it wasn't the creatures this time. It was my own voice, perfect, clear, coming from somewhere far beneath our feet. I staggered, gripping the railing. "It's mimicking me now?" "No," the older guard said quietly, eyes narrowing. "That wasn't mimicry." "Then what?" He grabbed my arm. "That was a reflection." My blood turned to ice. Reflections don't talk, I whispered. They do, he said. When they separate. The walkway shuddered violently. Something was climbing up toward us. The walkway trembled so hard the metal grated under our boots like it was about to snap. The voice, my voice, echoed up from the dark again, clearer this time, like it was climbing the beams ahead of its body. Elias, wait. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't mimicking. It sounded exactly like me when I'm scared, when my voice cracks on the last syllable. It sounded like a version of myself begging. I staggered back, my hand tightening on the railing until the steel cut into my palm. Don't respond, the older guard said. Don't even think about what it is. How am I not supposed to think about it? I hissed. Something metallic clanged below us. Loud, heavy, too coordinated to be an accident. The sound traveled up the beams like a vibration through bone. All right, he said in a low voice. Quick lesson so you don't die. Reflections can separate from their anchor if the cycle is too unstable. My reflection? I whispered. Your attention gave it shape. Now it's looking for you. The words hit hard enough to take my breath away. A pale hand appeared over the edge of a lower beam. My breath seized. It was shaped exactly like mine. Same knuckles, same freckles, same faint scar on the wrist. It gripped the beam with jerky precision. A second hand followed. Then a face, my face, rose into view but wrong. Skin too smooth, eyes too reflective, smile too slow like it needed extra seconds to understand how to move the muscles. What do we do? I whispered. We move, the older guard said. Now. He pushed me forward down the walkway. Every step rattled through the steel, drawing the attention of the thing climbing up after us. My reflection's head tilted unnaturally, like a dog trying to interpret a new noise. Then it lunged upward, hoisting itself onto the lower walkway. It was fast, faster than us. My pulse tore through my ribs as we ran. The walkway vibrated from the impact of the creature's steps. Metal groaned under its weight. Ahead, the catwalk ended at a rusted door with a smashed keypad. No way, I breathed. It's locked. The older guard skidded to a halt beside it and slammed his shoulder into the metal. It'll open. It's sealed. It shifts, he said. It's only sealed for people who belong here. I blinked at him, confused, but he didn't explain. He shoved the door again, metal screaming. Behind us, my reflection crawled onto the walkway fully, its joints cracking and stiff, slow clicks like a puppet whose strings were being yanked in the wrong directions. It smiled. Not a human smile, a learning smile. Faster, the older guard growled at the door. Come on. The reflection version of me stood upright, too tall, neck too long, stretching, vertebrae clicking. It copied my posture, but exaggerated like it was exaggerating a signature to understand it better. Then it took a step toward us. The walkway shook. Guard! I choked. He rammed the door with his entire weight. The hinges popped in a shower of rust. The door opened, just as the reflection lunged. We threw ourselves through the opening, slamming the door shut. Something hit the other side instantly, hard. The metal dented inward with a sickening bend. Dust sifted from the frame. The older guard grabbed a heavy chain from a hook and looped it around the bar, securing the door. The banging stopped. Silence, but not empty silence. Listening silence. Waiting silence. Is it going to break through? I whispered. Not immediately, the older guard said, breathing heavily. It needs you to look at it directly to finish forming. That door buys us time. We turned. We'd entered a vast, dim room, some sort of mechanical heart of the building. Huge metal columns rose into the darkness above. Thick bundles of conduit and piping branched outward like veins. A faint thrum vibrated through the floor in slow, pulsing waves. "What is this place?" I asked. "The central control chamber," he said. "It regulates the cycle. Every abandoned mall, hospital, or empty structure has one. They don't tell you that part during job orientation." I swallowed. "You said we could use it to stop the shift." He nodded once. "If we're fast enough." We approached a large metal console built into the center of the room. It looked decades old, rusted levers, heavy dials, industrial readouts with flickering analog needles. He started flipping switches with urgency. "Does this fix everything?" I asked. "Does it stop all of them?" "No," he said. "It just tells the mall to stop rearranging long enough for us to leave." "How long does that buy us?" "Depends how angry it is." The console's lights flickered, then illuminated with a deep, low hum that buzzed in my teeth. "There," the older guard said. "That should stabilize the—" A voice behind us interrupted him. "Leave that." Not in my voice. Not in his. A new voice. Deep, smooth, human-sounding, but off like someone reading from a script they'd memorized secondhand. We spun around. A figure stood near the far column, emerging from the shadows. Tall, still, perfectly shaped like a man, but the edges of it blurred slightly, as if the outline was struggling to stay consistent. I whispered, "Is that another reflection?" "No," he said quietly. "That's something older." The figure stepped forward. Its movements were calm, deliberate, almost polite. "You don't belong here," it said in that steady, borrowed voice. "Your presence disrupts the cycle." The older guard pushed me behind him. "Stay back." The figure tilted its head. The movement was too controlled, too precise. Spoke again. "Reset the cycle. Then leave." Its voice wasn't a threat. It was an instruction. I whispered, "Why would it help us?" The older guard didn't answer, because he didn't believe it was helping. The figure took another step. "You don't run," it said. "You don't hide. You reset the cycle." "How do we know you won't?" I began. The figure instantly mimicked my voice. "Elias, reset it." My blood froze. It was speaking like a living rule. The older guard leaned toward me, whispering so quietly I barely heard it. "That's not a reflection. It's the mall's voice." The figure extended a hand toward the console. "Reset it," it repeated, more insistent now. "But why?" I breathed. The older guard's expression tightened. "Because if we reset it the wrong way," he whispered, "we lock ourselves in." The figure twitched, only a millimeter, but enough to shift the air around us. "And what happens if we don't reset it?" I asked. The older guard swallowed. "Then everything in the mall finishes forming." Something slammed into the chain door behind us. The reflection, harder now, desperate. The figure stood between us and the console, waiting, and every breath of the mall felt like it was holding itself perfectly still, right before something terrible chooses a direction. The chain door behind us buckled again, the metal shrieking as my reflection hammered at it with unnatural strength. Each impact growing more confident, more certain of its own shape. Dust rained down from the hinges. The console lights flickered in response, as if the mall itself reacted to the thing trying to force its way inside. The tall figure didn't turn toward the noise. It watched only us, its blurred outline sharpening for a moment with each syllable. "Reset the cycle," it repeated, voice calm, patient, wrong. The older guard stepped between me and the console. "We're not resetting anything until we know which cycle you mean." The figure's head tilted with a slow, jointless rotation, the movement as smooth as a camera turn. "The mall is unstable. This night cannot end if the cycle remains broken. So help us fix it," the older guard said. "I am." the figure replied. Begin the reset. It pointed at the console with a steady, human-shaped hand. If it hadn't been for the faint flicker at the edge of its silhouette, the subtle glitching like a heat mirage, I might have believed it. But something about the way it spoke felt scripted, like instructions a machine might give while pretending to be alive. Another impact shook the door behind us. This time a faint crack appeared near the hinge. My reflection was almost through. I whispered, "How do we know resetting it won't lock us in?" The older guard's jaw clenched. "We don't. That's the problem." The figure took one step closer. The air bent around it like gravity had shifted. "You entered during a broken cycle," it said. "You cannot exit during one. Reset it." Something cold seeped into my spine. "You're not telling us the whole truth." The figure's face flickered, its features softening, sharpening, then softening again, like it hadn't decided which form to hold. "Truth is irrelevant. Stability is necessary," the older guard whispered. "It wants the cycle perfect, not balanced. Perfect. That's not the same thing." The pounding at the door turned frantic. No longer slow, learning taps. My reflection had shape now. It had decision. It had purpose. "Elias," it whispered through the crack in a voice that sounded almost identical to mine, but stronger, confident. "Oh, let me in." My stomach churned. Why does it sound like it knows me better than I know myself? "It knows the outline of you," the older guard said. "And the outline is always simpler than the real thing. That's what makes it dangerous. It thinks it can do your life better than you." The tall figure took another step toward the console, blocking the switches. "Reset," it ordered, no longer sounding polite. "We don't know what happens afterward," the older guard said, standing firm. "You will leave," the figure said. "You're lying," he shot back. The figure didn't blink. "I don't lie. Lies require intention." It reached toward one of the console levers, the biggest one, the one I guess controlled the main flow. The older guard grabbed its arm. His fingers sank slightly into its surface, as though it were made of compressed fog or clay. The figure turned its head toward him, and I swear the temperature dropped several degrees. "Release," it said. "No," he growled. The figure's arm pulsed, a wave of distortion rippling through it like static across a screen. The older guard staggered back, clutching his hand as though it had burned him. The figure raised its arm again. The chain on the door snapped. My reflection stepped into the room. It was perfect now. Same height, same build, same face, except its eyes were too bright, too reflective, like someone had swapped them for small, polished mirrors. It smiled at me, my own lips curling in a shape I didn't know how to make. The older guard stepped in front of me. "No," the reflection said in my voice. "He's done." The tall figure turned toward my reflection. The air between them shimmered like two frequencies meeting. The older guard leaned close to me. "We force a break." "How?" "We disrupt them all." "How?" He pointed at the console. "Two cycles can't run at once. You trigger the emergency shutdown. I trigger the reset. The system collapses on itself. Everything scrambling for form loses cohesion." I stared at him, panic surging. "Will that get us out?" "It'll get you out," he said. "What about you?" I choked. He didn't answer, because he didn't need to. He'd been here too long. He didn't belong outside anymore. The tall figure turned toward us sharply. "Do not destabilize the cycle." My reflection moved closer, its steps too smooth, too rhythmic. It lifted its hand toward me like it wanted to take my place by force. Not violently, but with the confidence of a replacement claiming a vacancy. "Elias," it said softly, "you were never meant to come here. The older guard grabbed my hand. "We move now." He dove for the right side lever. I lunged for the left, heart pounding so hard the world blurred around the edges. The tall figure glided toward us. My reflection mimicked my sprint, its hand reaching for the same lever I aimed for. "Pull it!" the older guard shouted. I slammed my palm onto the metal handle. My reflection's hand collided with mine, cold, slick, like touching wet porcelain. Its face twisted momentarily, as though surprised by resistance. "Pull it!" he yelled again. I yanked the lever down. The older guard yanked his at the exact same moment. The console erupted in a violent surge of light, white, blinding, loud. The entire chamber vibrated like an engine detonating. The tall figure convulsed, its outline shredding into fractal distortions. My reflection screamed, not in my voice, but in an empty, broken sound like a television going off-channel. Its body split down the center, peeling like film melting in a projector. The lights burst, then everything went dark. A new dark, a true dark, and the mall exhaled one last time. Not angry, not hungry, empty. A soft hand grabbed my arm in the dark. "Elias," the older guard whispered. "Run. Don't stop." I stumbled forward through the void, straight into daylight, real daylight. I collapsed in the cracked parking lot outside Brookfall Galleria, gasping. Behind me, the mall stood silent, hollow, unassuming. Just a ruin again. Just concrete and broken windows. No movement, no voices, no reflection. I turned back toward the entrance. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the older guard's silhouette behind the glass. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just lifted one hand, as a warning or a farewell. Then the glass reflected only me, and my reflection smiled a second too late.